Top of the day, everyone. I hope that everyone is remaining of good courage and staying strong and healthy as we continue to forge our way through these times of quarantine and this global pandemic. So glad that you're here with me today for another episode of the Realest Realtor. And for the month of May, we're going to be focusing on the cost of COVID. So our show today is going to primarily deal with housing. But, this is the Realest Realtor, and this is where we keep it real, the stuff that makes you feel, right? You all remember that rap song. So today I'm going to not only focus on what the cost of COVID has been to housing, but what the detrimental cost is to the Black community when we are not availing ourselves to the information and the professionals out here to help you secure your slice of the earth, not just once for your primary home, but multiple times. So please, I ask you to indulge me while I connect the dots. So we know that we have been seeing a great deal of tragedy and loss recently as it pertains to COVID-19, the silent enemy that seems to have kind of swept our globe. However, as I've been having a lot more time alone and being a little more introspective, I've really started to ask myself, is this really a silent enemy? Or is this something that came along to make the earth stop and take a good look at itself? So as we kind of go through some of the points today, I feel like that's a question that you should continually ask yourself as well. When we look at the cost of COVID-19 as it pertains to housing, there's been a lot going on as so many people have had to stay inside and kind of take refuge in their homes. And, we're all being asked to do our part so that we can prevent the spread of this virus. Now, we know that we've seen many people of privilege to the contrary who seem to think that they can do whatever they want, pulling out their guns, storming state capitals, spitting in the faces of police officers, of course, with no recourse. None of them were killed or slaughtered at all because of the fact that they feel their rights are being infringed upon by being asked to do their part to maintain safety for everyone. At the end of the day, I'm sure a lot of those folks with those good old AK-47s probably then were able to return to their homes that are probably spaced out quite a bit from their neighbors without any fear of them, socially being too close to anyone. But I think that it definitely is so important for us to think about the impact of housing on how this crisis has kind of moved through different demographic groups. When you think about renters, people in apartments or condos versus people in single family homes, the real possibility of them not only not being able to pay their rent has been present since the beginning of this pandemic, when we've seen so many workers, of course, having to not go into their jobs or being laid off from jobs, or hourly workers who are having to still go into jobs, and they were put in harm's way, many of whom contracted COVID-19, maybe even lost their lives as a result of it. Data showed that as of April 5th, 30% of Americans were not able to pay their rent. And that is a significant number. When we know that around March was kind of when so many things were closing down, things were shifting, and different protections were being rolled out. But at no time were these protections really extending to different groups or multiple groups. The NMHC, which is the National Multifamily Housing Council, they had been urging government that entire time to really take some protective or implement some protective legislation for renters, because, although they were putting in these protective measures for homeowners, they were not putting in certain measures to help renters, like rent freezes, halting evictions, or even being able to use security payments, to cover their rent. So again, when we look at where the focus was and where the help was going, it wasn't going to the spine of the country, those who work in very critical or essential skill areas to, provide us with the services so that we can purchase our food, or provide us with the services so that we can go and purchase cleaning equipment or supplies, things of that nature, while putting themselves and their own families at risk and still having to worry about the fact that they may be evicted or not able to pay their rent, and having to choose between providing food for their family during the time of pandemic when their pay has been cut, or paying to keep a roof over their head. So it definitely shows Washington's lack of support as far as helping in the area for renters, and the fact that Washington consistently, and even to this day, keeps putting the responsibility back on the states. Where we did see a difference and some impact, of course, came out of New York City when Mayor Bill de Blasio had presented a need for renter protection, and he implemented measures so that the New York City Rent Guidelines Board would have to really help out with, halting these evictions, freezing rents, preventing people from not only worrying about not having work, but also worrying about being homeless during the time of a pandemic. Can you freaking imagine how that type of worry must weigh on a person and their family in the middle of a pandemic? And I know in New York they have a lot of rent control buildings, but again, there really needed to be someone that had the gall and the nerve to step in and say, listen, I know there's pushback, but we've got to do something so that we're able to first deal with the enemy at hand, which is COVID-19. And then from there, be able to restore everyone in a fair way, so that, again, the brunt of the weight isn't carried on the back of those who are always persecuted. So, that was really so paramount. And, there was a group that had talked about the fact that enacting another rent freeze would only expedite the deterioration of the city's aging housing stock in New York. And it said that it would do nothing to aid the tenants that are already struggling to pay the rent in the midst of the crisis. And, again, when you look at the opposite argument to that, to say that relief wasn't merited for people that rent, but that relief was being offered to homeowners, to me is such of an awful, awful contradiction. It's just an awful contradiction, and it's ugly. It is so ugly. When you have a $2 trillion economic rescue package for homeowners, giving them the option to defer their mortgage payments till the end of their loan, or, to go a couple months in missing payments, all types of creative things are being worked out. And then not offering anything for renters is about as distasteful as it comes. And it just shows, again, where the priorities of this country lie. So, we know that mom and pop buildings, things that are owned by private citizens as opposed to a big conglomerate like a Bozzuto or an Equity. We know these smaller apartment holdings for smaller companies, it's important that they're able to get their rent. But, it was also important that the government figure out a path so that those folks could stay complete without having to evict their tenants, many of whom have been long-standing tenants that I'm sure they didn't want to lose as well. So it's not saying that they're heartless, but just that the government really did not go far enough to address the needs of both renters and homeowners. And then even in the midst of all this, they then try to roll out some new restrictions from these larger banks on even people wanting to purchase homes. They were tightening the lending requirements, increasing credit scores, things of that nature, and trying to make it seem that it was a result of all of the refinance requests that had been made, when in actuality, according to Ken Fear from the National Association of Realtors, he's actually the senior policy representative for banks and housing finance and lending. He and I quote, he mentioned refinancing, of course, helps stabilize home ownership, but home sales is what helps drive the economy. So if people can't continue to buy homes, that in and of itself can destabilize the economy. So it's crucial to continue to provide access to credit for home purchases. So one of the things that I do want to point out here is that it's not all doom and gloom as far as home purchasing. The interest rates are still at an all-time low, which is good. The housing market has seen some slow down in the sense that people are listing a little slower, of course, because of the health constraints, not wanting so many people in and out of their homes, and buyers, of course, not wanting to, tour homes, although we have been doing many virtual brokers opens and tours and things of that nature. Sellers are a little bit nervous, at this point. So because of their willingness to kind of wait and see what's happening with this pandemic, it really actually bodes in favor of the buyer, because buyers now are having a little less competition, because those people who were just looky-loos or not serious about buying anyway, well, they're dropping out of the rotation because of COVID-19 and not necessarily wanting to move in and out and commit to a process like this in the midst of a pandemic. So those who are in position and serious about buying, now is the time to pull that trigger, because once sellers start releasing their listing and kind of, when things start opening up safely, of course, a little more, then you'll have more people who are ready to sell because they've waited this long for this pandemic to plateau, and you'll have fewer buyers in the market because those who were uncommitted and unmotivated and even unprepared have gotten out of the game. So that is why I say to people, it is best to stay prepared. If you are always ready, you don't have to get ready. And it is always important to make sure you're working with your professional now, so that when the time presents itself, you're able to pull the trigger and really benefit from not only these low rates, but from what is going to be a momentary rise in the inventory on the market. And I say momentary because all things come and then they level out again. So the cost of COVID to renters versus homeowners clearly is very different. And the fact that you can own a home now for the same amount that you're paying as a renter should really speak to your soul and really demonstrate why it's so important to make that decision now, to get in position now. Because let me tell you the larger social impact of not only owning your own home, but also owning multiple investment properties. And I'm going to try to not get emotional, because this portion I'm speaking from my heart, as I do with all things. The fact that homeowners, the cost of COVID to homeowners as far as riding out the pandemic has been very different. They are not living in apartments where they are piled one on top of the other, whether in high-rise buildings or, or other buildings that may have a large concentration of, people who may be hourly workers or low income workers, or, have the working poor. I mean, really. So they're able to kind of ride it out. They're sitting in their backyard. They're walking around their neighborhood. They're able to socially distance. They're coming outside, singing their songs, playing their guitars, doing whatever. So yeah, for them, riding out of quarantine has been a little different. They've had different economic stimulus packages to help them with their mortgage payments, as they should. So, and that's fine. But we can't forget that for those who are still renters and needing that support to become homeowners, there should have been relief for those folks as well, not just on the economic side, but even just in how the execution of physical well-being was carried out throughout our country. This is why homeownership to me is just so valuable, because it's not one of the things about me. I don't think I've ever shared this. I don't let people know where I live, especially people I work with, because they're nosy. They don't need to know where I live. The only reason you'll ever know where I live is if you're someone that I trust enough and you're in my inner circle. And that's because home is my sanctuary. I've used a physical address that's separate from my home for years now, primarily for business purposes. Home is a sanctuary because it's where you take refuge, whether it's from the world around you or whether it's from a pandemic, right? Home is a sanctuary, okay? And the other thing about home is that it establishes your place in the world, your neighborhood, where you are safe and where you are surrounded by people who are like you, who know you, and who look out for you. Why am I pointing this out? I'm pointing this out because for the people that I have been fighting for decades to help, to assist, to educate, to bring them into the realm of home ownership, it's with a heavy heart I talk about this today, as I just yesterday viewed the video of our young brother Ahmaud Arbery in Brunswick, Georgia, who was killed in the street like a fucking dog, simply jogging. This young man was accosted, murdered, slaughtered by two white neighbors in a neighborhood that was adjacent, to where he lived. He jogged through this neighborhood all the time. He didn't live in that particular neighborhood. He didn't live in a neighborhood nearby. These two white murderers took it amongst themselves to say, hey, he looks like somebody that was involved with some break-ins. So they call themselves executing this citizen's arrest. Now, you have on jogging pants and a white t-shirt and running shoes. No weapon, no anything. Earbuds in, can't really hear, you're out jogging. They jump in their good old boy pickup truck and they ride down on this young man. And excuse me, I'm sorry, they're cutting my grass outside. Ride down on this young man with a shotgun and a handgun and killed this boy in the street. They were actually on the phone with 911. The 911 dispatcher even asked them, because the father happens to be a retired police officer who is currently an investigator with the district attorney's office. The dispatcher specifically asked them, what criminal act is this person engaged in right now? To which they did not answer. And then moments later, they shot and killed this young man. It was only through the grace of God that someone caught this on camera and leaked it just yesterday. That clearly shows that they not only were the aggressors, they cornered this young man using an automobile, attacked him, shot him multiple times as he fought in the street for his life and died in the middle of the street. Let me tell you why home ownership matters. Because you need to be building communities where the neighbors are either people you're related to, or the people that look like you, who will come to your defense and take up arms if necessary to protect their homes, your home, their lives, and your life. I will not let certain people know where I live because they do not live the life that I live. They don't have the concerns that I have. They don't have to worry about their black daughter, their beautiful melanated nieces, their beautiful melanated nephews, the same way that I do. And I will be damned if they ever set foot in a home where I live. Because if you are not my ally, you are my open enemy. You are not going to convince me that a man cannot simply jog in his neighborhood without being killed in the damn street. Trayvon Martin, killed in the street in Florida, February 26th, for simply walking to the store for some tea and some Skittles. His father had moved to that neighborhood thinking he was moving to a better location. Look what happened. Eric Gardner, simply killed in the street, accused of selling some Lucy's. Y'all know what Lucy's are. Accused of selling some damn single cigarettes. Did you all know this man had been a horticulturist for the New York City Rec Department? Killed in the street. Tamar Rice, 12 years old, killed for simply playing with a damn toy gun. Philandro Castile, killed in a car in front of his child and his fiance for simply complying with the police. Fuck out of here. You're not going to convince me home ownership doesn't matter. You know why it matters? Because this is where you build community. This is where you fortify yourself. This is where you fortify your family. This is where you begin building your legacy. This is where it matters. Because if we are not building our own communities, and if we are not demanding that police within our communities exercise community policing, where they actually get to know the people in that community, we will never move beyond the streets being colored red with our blood. I'm going to invite you to go over and visit mappingpoliceviolence.org, where you can see that Black people are the most likely to be killed by police. As a matter of fact, we're 3 times more likely to be killed by police. This is why it matters that we build our own communities and that we build them strong, that we own homes where we're surrounded by people who understand our plight and our concerns and our worries, that we spend our money in our community forcing people to listen to our voice, because all they care about is that green dollar. They don't have our concerns. They don't have our worries, because the world was built white, although it was built on my back. Now is always the time to purchase. I am not here to offend. I am here to give you the real. If you are not my ally, you are my open enemy. I invite you all to educate yourself. I implore you to stay strong, stay united, and stay vigilant, because this revolution will not be televised. You need to stop just laying down for anything. The only thing needed for evil to prevail is for good men and women to do nothing. I challenge you all to do something. Stay blessed until next time.